Okay, so before we get going today, just a quick reminder that quiz number one, based on topic number one, is the deadline is today. I think it's programmed to finish at the end of the day, so 11:59. I think we've got 23 people have done it, I think. So that still means there's 7 or 8 of you out there who have not done the quiz. And remember, you get 2 takes. And so if you weren't happy with your grade on the first take, please take a second take. Okay, so back to topic 2. This will be the last lecture for topic 2. Today we're going to talk about food labels, and we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess we can call them superfoods or functional foods. There's a few different names for these kind of things, and talk about some of them in particular as well. So let's get into this and talk about food labels. We're going to get pretty familiar with food labels this semester. So one thing to say about food labels is, first of all, you may have noticed that not every food has them. So if you go and buy, let's say, an apple at the grocery store, or some bananas, or even, let's say, some fresh salmon from the meat section, or something like that. A lot of food labels are not required for kind of, I guess, I'm not exactly sure what the classification is, fresh and whole foods. Pretty much anything in a package, though, requires a food label. And there are food and nutrition information there. It is available for the other foods as well. I think a lot of grocery stores kind of have them on hand in case people ask for them. Although, of course, nowadays a lot of this information is freely available on the internet. So I just want to say that there's kind of a difference between a food label and the nutrition facts. The nutrition facts is really just a part of the food label. The whole food label is going to contain a bunch of things. It's going to include the ingredients. It might include health claims, and we'll kind of come back and talk about what is allowed. There are some criteria established by Health Canada in terms of what health claims are allowed to be on that food label. And it might have a few other things, such as the supplier, or the manufacturer, or the producer, or something like that as well. We're also going to be focusing on the nutrition facts part of this. Just so you know, when we say food label, it does include a bunch of things that are legislated by Health Canada. Let's talk about food labels here. Looking around my house, and of course there are many food labels on many products. And here, I guess I kind of said some of this. These are the things that must be included by law. So the name of the product, or the usual name of the product. And even with some products, there are laws around how you can name it. You may have noticed that sometimes you get orange juice, and sometimes you get orange drink. So we'll talk a little bit about that one, and that has a little bit to do with sugars and natural ingredients, things like that. We'll talk about that later on in the semester. I think I mentioned some of those other things: name of the manufacturer, or supplier, or whatever. I guess one thing I forgot to mention is the weight, right, or the volume, some sort of count, or something like that. And like I said, you know, a lot of grocers do have available handouts, or sometimes on their internet, for fresh foods and things like that. So here's kind of a little graphic, what's on the food label. I guess we mentioned some of these things already. We've got the common name of the product, the approved claims that are allowed to be set on there. And if it's not approved, they are subjecting themselves to possible lawsuits in some cases. The volume, and I want to talk about the nutrition labels a little bit, and we'll take a look at some samples as well here. So starting at the top, how much a serving amount is. So that's kind of an important thing to look at. We'll get into that in a minute. But basically what they're doing is basing all of the other information on that serving amount. So you can see in this case here, this is some sort of cookie. And so serving amount is considered to be 2 cookies. They usually also give you the volume or weight is pretty typical. So if you're looking at some sort of breakfast cereal, it might say 200 grams or 100 grams or something like that. And, as a typical serving size. This is why some people are really counting their calories and things like that, often on scales, and they're trying to measure things as precisely as possible. It's going to have the amount of calories in that particular serving, and then the quantities of the nutrients, and some nutrients must be listed. So saturated fats and trans fats must be listed, as well as cholesterol, sodium, and a breakdown of carbohydrates and proteins. And certain vitamins have to be mentioned as well, or if they're not included, then there has to be a statement that says not included in any significant quantity or something like that. You can see the ingredients, the manufacturer, and in some cases a best before date. It's trying to find information on best before dates, because my best understanding is that they're not necessarily legislated as much as people might think, but I couldn't find some clear information on that. So when I do, I will share that with you. Something you may or may not have noticed is that these nutrient fact labels have been changing, particularly recently, because Health Canada has legislated some changes. And the changes aren't full law until December of 2022. So we're still a few months away from that. Some companies have already started changing over the labels. Most have not. Most look like the one on the left. But we're going to start to see some changes. And you can see some of the big changes is the number of calories is going to be bigger. So I guess that's one of the main things that they're asking you to look at. Apparently there's updates on daily values, probably from the Canada Food Guide that was updated recently. And so I think that's a big part of it. And you can see it's showing some of the minerals are shown in how many milligrams rather than, and as well as percentages, right? So, it's not significant. I guess it's just a little bit of feedback they've had over the years, and they've decided this is going to hopefully make things more straightforward for consumers. Hopefully, anyway. These nutrient fact labels are not as bad as they look. A little bit of practice, and they're really not that difficult to read. In this course too, you'll get a pretty good idea of what all these nutrients are talking about, right? Saturated fats versus trans fats. We'll talk about fats soon. One of the other big updates is the feedback that they've been given around sugars. A lot of people don't know which ingredients are sugars, right? And so if you take a look at that ingredients list on the left, it has fancy molasses, it has brown sugar, and probably a table sugar, just called sugar. And so they're actually getting those things kind of grouped together. And so, that's just something that's some feedback of which most people are consuming too much sugar. And so they're trying to, make even people more aware of that. And I mean, who knows, maybe it'll turn into some changes in habits. I guess that's the hope anyway. So food labels, I guess this should say nutrition fact label, must contain. And I guess I already mentioned some of these things, but there's some of the nutrients that they must contain. Total fat, cholesterol and sodium, total carbohydrate, protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, iron. Not sure why they chose those particular vitamins. Maybe I'll figure that out at some point, because there are other vitamins in our food and other minerals, but those are the ones that have to be contained. Anything else that's in there in significant quantities may be listed. I don't think it's required, but most things do it anyway. If you take a look at this Rice Krispies label, right? For example, we have right here, thiamine. Apparently, in one serving of Rice Krispies, you get 45% of the percent daily value. So, that's pretty impressive, right? And so they decided to include that. You can see they have other ingredients there, manganese, folate, and a few things like that. You can see the nice thing about this Rice Krispies label is that it's also telling you, how many nutrients, calories, and otherwise you're getting when you have it with a half a cup of milk, which is probably the most common way that people consume Rice Krispies. So it has both options there, just in case you don't use them up. Maybe you're using the Rice Krispies in some other recipe or something like that. I wanted to show you another nutrition label I saw. I had a package of gum, and I was like, oh, gum has a nutrition label. I never noticed this before. And you can see that it is not calorie neutral. Apparently you get 5 calories from 2 pieces of gum. So that's not very much. It's close to 0, but it's not considered 0 by the guidelines. And I think if it's less than 1, they don't have to include it. I'm trying to remember that detail. Because there are some products, I saw a product out there that was like I don't know what you want to call it, a butter substitute. It was kind of funny. It came in a little spray bottle, and apparently, you pump the little lever on the top and you spray it on your toast or whatever, or you spray it on your vegetables, and apparently 2 sprays is 0 calories. So like I said, I think if it's less than 1, they can say it's 0 is how it works, but I can't remember the exact rule on that. But notice it does not have calcium or iron or vitamin A or C listed, but it does have this statement, right? Not a significant source of other nutrients. So that's kind of following the legislations there. You can see it has to include fats, has to include proteins, even if it's 0, and so they're following the rules on that. So I just wanted to show you a couple of food labels. This was not included in the PowerPoint that I posted on Moodle because I just made this slide. I was looking around for some different food labels and for comparison. This one here on the left is another cereal, by the way, which is called Weetabix. I don't know if anyone likes Weetabix. My mom got me into that one. It's actually a pretty good cereal. It's a little bit different. It doesn't come in little chunks. It comes in these little biscuits. Anyway, I want to just kind of give you some tips on, and maybe write some notes here on interpreting food labels. So as I mentioned before, a lot of fresh foods and whole foods don't need food labels, fruit and meats and things like that. One thing you may have noticed in that video that I showed you last day is the woman was saying, if you avoid foods with food labels, you're already on the way to good nutrition. But of course, that's not going to happen. Very few people are going to do that kind of thing. Most of us do buy processed foods. It doesn't mean that they're all bad for us. It just means we got to, maybe pay a little bit more attention, might be prudent, right? So first thing to look at, a lot of people look at the calories first, right? First thing, number 1, is look at the serving size. Okay, that's important because how much are you actually going to eat? And let me just take a peek ahead here. I think I might have another label I wanted to show everyone. I wanted to show you this one here. This was some banana bread that I bought, and well, you know what? Banana bread is pretty yummy, and I could easily eat 4 pieces, 6 pieces, right? I mean, it's super easy, and the pieces are not even that big. But take a look at this. They're considering 1 serving to be 2 slices and 320 calories. So if I ate 4 pieces, that's 640 calories. That's huge. That's about maybe the third of the calories I should be consuming in a day. So that's why that's kind of the most important thing to look at. The place to start is to look at the serving size, because that may determine on how much you decide to eat or how much is appropriate to eat, particularly if you're consuming anything that's high in fats or sugars or something like that. Maybe you need to be careful, right? There's only so much sugar you should be having in a day. It's only so many fats, and so you got to be aware of these kind of things. Like I said, the banana bread was a big surprise for me. I was thinking, okay, it can't be that bad, can it? 320 calories, that's pretty significant. So that's number 1, is always look at the serving size. And then number 2, you can take a look at the calories, okay? So, and that's going to give you a place to start in terms of probably, like I said, it may not be the most important fact is the calories, but it may be if you're trying to lose weight. So maybe I'll put a note about that. May or may not be important. All right, if I'm chewing gum, the amount of calories there is obviously not an important fact, right? But if you're trying to lose weight, it might be important. So I'll put that important if trying to lose weight. Okay, so that's another place to look. And then everything else is kind of, depends on what you're looking for and what kind of food you're actually eating, right? Whether it's important to look at the sugars or the fibers or things like that. So I'm just going to put everything else under note 3 and, some things that you can look at, right? So for example, fibers. And we'll talk about fiber a little bit soon once we get to carbohydrates in terms of why it's important. But it's pretty important for digestion, and it's important for, like I think I had mentioned before, you probably realize that older people are more concerned about fiber because as you age, your digestive system, needs a little bit more help from these kind of things, right? And fibers are good for, they can also stabilize blood glucose levels and they can delay hungers and things like that. So this is one of the reasons why I compared Weetabix with Rice Krispies. You can notice Weetabix has 4 grams of fiber per serving and the Rice Krispies has 0 grams. So if I'm somebody who is looking for fiber, then maybe this would change my selection in cereals a little bit, right? And like I said, stabilizing blood glucose levels. So people who are diabetic or near that category of being pre-diabetic or something like that, that's a really important kind of factor. And a lot of people find, high fibrous foods kind of, they make you feel like they take a little bit longer to digest. So you don't feel as hungry as sooner. So this is kind of a good thing to look at. So we have fibers, that's one thing to look at. So maybe I should title, let me just erase that for a second. I'm going to give number 3 a title, pointer options, eraser. We'll call it other things to consider. So here we go, other things to consider. All right, so A was fibers. Okay, so B is added sugars. So sugars, I think the bottom line to say is most of us eat too much. And, just to give you an idea of how much sugar is in these things. So 4 grams of sugar. So if you take a look at, that's how much is in the Weetabix, and the Rice Krispies have 3 grams. But 4 grams of sugar is basically 1 teaspoon of sugar. So that's a teaspoon, TSP. So by having 2 biscuits of Weetabix, I'm consuming about 1 teaspoon of sugar. Is that too much? It depends on how much sugar you're having in a day, right? That's actually not a lot for a breakfast cereal. Some of them are far worse. I don't actually have any at my house. So sometimes once in a while we'll have Lucky Charms or something like that. I'll have to see if I can dig up a box so we can compare that maybe in the future. But that is something to look at, right? In the nutrition facts, like if you're consuming a high sugar food, let's say you're having a can of soda pop or you're eating some other dessert product, it might be worth it to consider how much you're having in a day, right? 1 can of soda pop has a significant amount of sugar in it. And so maybe the question is, should you have 2 cans? Or maybe that should be all the sugar you're having for the day kind of thing. Again, everyone's diet and things like that are going to be different, but it is something important to consider. What else to consider? The fats, of course. And So taking a look at the total fats, so maybe I'll put a sub note here, the total fats, and then the breakdown. So we'll call this breakdown. And what I'm usually looking at is I'm not going to put the whole word because I'm running out of room. Well, I guess I can just keep on writing unsaturated versus the saturated. Okay, so these unsaturated ones, these ones are better for you. And in the case of these breakfast cereals, you can see there's actually zero fat in them, right? Generally, saturated fat is going to be from animal products, and the unsaturated fat are usually from plant products, and they're usually a lot better. I'm surprised there's zero fat. Usually, there's at least a little bit in there. I guess 1 gram in the Weetabix, but no significant quantities of saturated or trans fats. Trans fats, by the way, you may have noticed is on the list here. Trans fats is on the list. We'll talk about those later on. I'm assuming that most nutritional labels are going to be zero because now it's actually law that they're not allowed to add trans fats to products, and they should be avoided basically entirely because they do contribute to atherosclerosis, which is the blockage of your veins and can lead to heart disease. They're really, really bad for you, which is why they've basically been banned entirely. Thankfully, it took them a few years, but they finally banned it from all our foods, and that's a good thing. So we'll talk more about trans fats when we do get to fats. Other things to look for, just enough room to kind of finish off what I want to talk about. So other things to look for is sodium. And I'm just looking, where is that? So 130 milligrams for the Weetabix and 135 milligrams for the Rice Krispies. Generally, less is better. Again, that kind of depends on your health situation. Most young people can tolerate reasonably high amounts of sodium. But if you have any, high blood pressure or heart disease in the family or any number of other conditions, it's kind of just a good general recommendation to reduce the amount of sodium in your diet. Like I said, most young people, it's not really a big deal. It's not something that has cumulative effects, such as eating too much fat. But again, well, it's something we'll talk about a little bit when we get to our unit on minerals. Last one here, of course, is vitamins and minerals. So we'll take a look at that, vitamins and minerals. And that's the kind of thing that, you're not going to, most people are not buying a product to, look for, okay, does this have lots of vitamin C in it? Does this have lots of iron in it? But it might be a situation, right? That is important. For example, if you're pregnant, you may have the recommendation that you need a little bit more iron in your diet, or something like that, right? That actually goes back to sodium as well. A lot of women are very, very healthy, but they have lots of weird quirks that happen in their health when they're pregnant, right? They could have amazing blood pressure all their life, and when they're pregnant, suddenly they have high blood pressure. And I know people that exact scenarios happen to. So suddenly they're being asked to, okay, you should probably cut out as much salt and sodium in your life as possible, at least until you're done being pregnant. And some of them, it's kind of just the beginning of health issues. Unfortunately, it all happens to all of us. As we age, our bodies are often not as good as they used to be, unfortunately. So the one thing just to say about vitamins and minerals is that they don't necessarily make it healthy, right? I mean, great. These breakfast cereals have a decent amount of iron in them. That's good. But it's kind of the whole picture of something that makes it healthy, right? And it may be something to compare, right? If you have two cereals and this one has a little more iron in it, then maybe that helps you make your choice and whatnot. But these are the kind of things that often food companies are using to boost claims, right? Like you might see on the front of the package, a great source of iron, or this one serving will give you 50% of your daily vitamin C needs, or something like that. Manufacturers know that nutrition claims help sell products, right? So, and they're going to use this information for better or worse. And so just something to kind of be aware of. But anyway, those, like I said, those are kind of some main tips for looking at the nutritional labels. The first thing is, of course, looking at the serving size because that is directly related to everything else. Are you going to eat 2 biscuits? Are you going to eat 10 of them? Think about all of the things that, particularly high-fat products, are the ones that it's really easy for us to go nuts on the serving size, right? I mean, who of us have ever bought a container or a bag of those 2-bite brownies, right? Those 2-bite brownies are, I think a serving is 2 brownies. I mean, are you kidding me? I could eat 10 in one sitting, no problem, right? It would be very easy to do so. They're absolutely delicious. Should I eat 10 in one sitting? That is entirely another question. Probably in most circumstances, 10 is probably not the thing I should be doing. But it's pretty hard to stop after 2, I'll just say that. Here's the banana bread, by the way. Just wanted to go back to that and take a look at it. You can see, like I said, it actually is pretty high calorie. 2 slices, they were pretty small slices in this banana bread that I bought. And you can see that it does have some saturated fat in it, probably because they used butter in it instead of margarine kind of thing, which is one way to cut down on your saturated fats, by the way. You can see if you look at the carbohydrates, there is a little bit of fiber in there and 25 grams of sugar, and which is a decent amount. That's 2 slices give you a quarter the amount of sugar you should be consuming in a day, kind of thing, right? So again, you stop at 2 slices. Maybe it just depends on what else you've been eating for the day, right? It's hard. It is not easy. As you can tell from what I'm talking about, there's certain things that is just hard to control impulse on. 2-bite brownies and banana bread being a couple of them on, and I think it's important to be aware. That's the beginning of good nutrition, is being aware, and then finding those ways to slowly change habits. The other thing I was going to point out is there is a decent amount of sodium in the banana bread as well, and you'll find that with a lot of processed products. When you start looking at these labels, I'm always surprised how much sugar and salt are added to things. But then on the other hand, to me, I'm not surprised because, of course, like salt and sugar taste good. So that's why they're being added to the products, because they're trying to make products that taste good. They're trying to make products where you're going to consume more. And those types of things actually, are shown to make people consume more when there's added sugar and things like that. So these are the dangers, right? I think that's all I'm going to say about nutrition facts and labels for now. I'll probably come back to some of these. Like I said, I was hoping to, I'll find some labels to show you as we go through some of the units on sugars and things like that, so we can compare how much sugar is in some of the products and whatnot. So it's worth it to come back to some of these at some point. And you're going to get some practice reading these for assignment 2 at some point. I'll hand out, I'm hoping, if I can get my act together, I can hand it out next week. You'll have about a month to do it. And assignment 2 is going to be on, you're going to track your nutrition activity for 3 days and use an online system to do that and write up a report about it. So we'll get to that. And like I said, if I can get my act together, I'm going to hand that out next week. Okay, so where are we now? Feel like I was going to, oh, yes, of course. So things that food labels may contain, right? Nutrient content descriptors, disease risk reduction claims. So sometimes they can display things like that on their food labels. The big one is the disease risk reduction claims, and I have a chart here in the next slide or maybe it's not this slide, maybe it's a couple slides later that kind of talk about that. This has been legislated apparently since 2002 about what you're allowed to say about your product, and we'll get to that. I was going to show you here's some of the descriptor claims, right? So calorie free. There it is. Okay, I thought it was 1 calorie, but I guess fewer than 5 calories is calorie free. So you could have a box of something, and right on the front you could write calorie free. And what does that mean? It means it has fewer than 5 calories. Low in calories, reduced or low calories, source of calories. So all of those things have distinct definitions from Health Canada, and that way at least there's a standard, right? in terms of what their claims are, right? Source of protein versus excellent source of protein. You can see that has to do with protein rating of 20 or more. I guess I have to look up what that was. I guess when I initially read that, I had read 20 grams. There's probably a footnote I have cut off on the slide. So I have to look that one up and see what that is. But you can see all the different descriptors. And so, if you're ever wondering what those things mean, you can come back to this table, fat-free versus low in fat or 100% fat-free. You can see there's actually different definitions around those things, right? Here's one too. We'll talk about when we get down here to trans fats, right? Free of trans fats. Just because something says it is 0 or free of trans fats, there may be small quantities in there. The reality is with something like trans fats, when the quantities are so small, it's actually that we don't have methods to measure when the quantities are so teeny tiny. And so they can basically say it is trans fat free, even though there might be tiny quantities in it. And a good example of that is something like peanut butter. And we'll talk about peanut butter as well. And I'll show you what it says right on the Kraft website about trans fats. If I can find it, it's possible they've taken it down. Here's some more descriptors: polyunsaturated fatty acids, and we'll talk about what some of those things mean, right? We've got these omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. You've probably heard some of these terms before. They all have meanings. We'll get to it when we talk about fats, as well as cholesterol as being part of the fat content, right? So like I said, lots of different definitions around what they can have on their label. And you see this all the time, right? Cholesterol free. I always laugh when I see things that are cholesterol free. I bought a thing of sunflower seeds this summer, and it said on the package, cholesterol free. Well, cholesterol is an animal product. So sunflower seeds are a plant product. So of course they're cholesterol free. But, they can take advantage of that, and it was true. So, again, it has to do with marketing, and they know that nutrition claims help to sell products, even if they're kind of pointless nutrition claims in that case. Fiber is another one. Light is one, right? So if you buy something that says light cheese or light yogurt or something like that, it's not as well defined as you'd like it to be, unfortunately. That was one I was a little bit surprised at, where it says reduced in energy or reduced in fat. Well, how much reduced? I mean, is it reduced 1%, reduced 50%? But it does have a definition. Maybe that will be fixed at some point in the future. Who knows? Here's the disease risk reduction claims, right? And so, these are looking at, for example, reduced risk of high blood pressure, hypertension, right? So this is looking at potassium and sodium levels. Risk of osteoporosis, looking at calcium, vitamin D, and regular physical activity. So these are all related to certain things that are connected in the science, right? High blood pressure is connected directly with salt levels, potassium and sodium kind of being the big ones, right? And so, there is good science behind this. So they can make that claim as long as, it's meeting certain levels. And it doesn't show on this list what those levels are, and I don't really know what they are off the top of my head. But these are things that can be looked up, of course, if you're interested in that kind of thing. So a lot of these things, we'll talk about these nutrients in coming units and kind of, tease out some of the details around what's going on with these particular nutrients and compared to some of these diseases. Okay, so part 2 of today's lecture, we want to talk about phytochemicals and functional foods. So my initial goal was to have a Kahoot there, but I'm just behind schedule on getting one organized. So you need a little stretch. You can take it, and we'll talk about these things. I first want to say that these are kind of like buzzwords. Phytochemicals. They sound good, right? I don't know. There's something about that word. It just sounds amazing. And I did a quick Google search for phytochemicals, and I found this graphic here, right? Everything that plants have that you want. Well, maybe. you'll see it's a little bit more nuanced than you might think. Technically, a phytochemical is a chemical, right, produced by a plant. And of course, plants produce many types of chemicals. Some of them are good for you, some of them are not. You know, and there's a lot of phytochemicals that have kind of, you know, there's buzz around them in terms of, oh, this is really good for you. And a lot of them have become supplements as well. And we're going to talk a lot more about supplements when we get to our vitamin unit. I'll kind of touch a little bit on it today in terms of what is going on. But I think the bottom line is, you know, to say phytochemicals are all good for you. Well, some of them are beneficial, some are neutral, some are actually harmful for you. And there's not as much research as we like to know in terms of the quantities that are good for you. And a lot of the science on them is still kind of inconclusive, right? It's more like there's a link between this and this, but are they causing one another? It's kind of hard to tell. There's virtually very few safety studies on taking them as supplements, and you know, they're kind of like drugs, but they're regulated under food, so it kind of gets messy with that kind of thing. Anyway, let me show you some phytochemicals. There's a whole bunch. If you go to table C2-2 in the book, there's more. This is a little bit different than that table on the textbook. I put this one together, kind of classifying things differently, but you can see there's a lot of chemical names there, and we'll cover a few of them here today. So for example, the first one group is called carotenoids. These are actually pigments. And so that's what you may get from the word carrot, right? Carotenoid. They're usually reddish, orangish type of pigments, right? So picture any food that's reddish or kind of orangish, right? Carrots, tomatoes. These carotenoids are found in quite a number of different vegetables, mostly. And they're also found in some dark leafy vegetables. There's other pigments in there that, so they, you know, like if you get spinach or broccoli, they don't look orange because there's also chlorophyll in there that's making them look green. But these have been shown to be what we call antioxidants, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute. But an antioxidant is a chemical that if you don't know what this means, that's fine. Just to give you a little bit of chemistry terminology, antioxidants will remove something called free radicals. And free radicals are very reactive chemical species that can damage cells and cause a whole variety of things like cancer and heart disease and whatnot. So antioxidants, what they do is they kind of mop up certain harmful chemicals that are produced in the body. And so there seems to be some science to link these with reducing things like heart disease and cancer and a few other diseases and so on. You can see, like I said, there's a whole bunch of these kind of, there's different ways to classify them and whatnot, and involved in a bunch of different foods. And you can see that kind of food column. There's a whole bunch of different foods listed there. And a lot of these foods, sometimes we'll call them functional foods or superfood foods. If you Google phytochemicals, another thing you'll see is there's this, and I don't know who popularized this, but a lot of these phytochemicals that people are trying to get in their diet have colors to them, right? So there's a whole bunch of marketing around this kind of idea of eating the rainbow, or make sure you get you know, at least a couple different colors in your diet every day, kind of thing. And you can see this, like I said, I found a couple of graphics and tables here very easily on the internet that kind of are pushing this idea, right? You can see, for example, in that column on the left, right? Here's the carotenoids. It's mentioning that they're kind of orangey color, right? And you can get them from a variety of different things, and you know, some of the health claims around them. You can see that little graphic on the right is maybe a little prettier and telling you, you know, where you can get, you know, the different colors, the different phytochemicals, and kind of has them in very small font, and then telling you what their potential benefits are. And so, you know, in theory, protecting against lots of diseases that we don't want, right? And like I said, I'll kind of get into some of this here as we talk about some of these foods. I just wanted to give you one more definition here. Something that that is talked about a lot nowadays are functional foods. And often people will use the term nowadays, I see it all the time, as superfoods. And so what does this mean, right? It means that this food is good for you. And often when we say superfood or functional food, it means it has lots of one of these good phytochemicals. Sometimes it could mean other things, right? We could be talking about, oh, I think I messed up there. I sort of wrote over my PowerPoint. Oatmeal is a good example of a superfood, right? If you compare oatmeal to other grains, oatmeal has a lot of protein in it, a lot of good protein in it. Also contains a lot more fiber than a lot of other grains. And of course, we know fiber is good for the things that we just talked about, lowering cholesterol levels and helping to maintain good blood sugar levels and things like that. There are tons of articles on the internet. If you Google functional food or superfoods, and there's tons of lists of them. You can see here's one I found on the right here, 10 functional foods that help you heal. And, and you'll see a lot of them on the same list, right? Garlic is often on these lists. Often red wine might be on some of these lists. Usually there's vegetables and nuts and things like that. And so if you think about it, often they're just kind of recommending you eat the food the way the Canada Food Guide is telling you to eat it. Eat lots of fruits and vegetables, look for things high in fiber, look for things with low sugar. And like I said, a lot of the claims around these functional foods or superfoods often has something to do with these phytochemicals, in that, the thought is that this food contains lots of this certain phytochemical, and therefore it's going to be amazing for you, right? So I have some functional foods I want to talk about, but usually they're kind of grouped into two categories, right? Conventional or normal or whole foods, right? So broccoli, fruits, nuts, those kind of things. So basically food that's ready to go from the farmer or the producer, right? And the second group are modified foods. The textbook kind of actually breaks this down into two categories. I kind of think of it as one category of modified foods. So this includes two things, right? Normal processed foods that have been fortified with something, right? So, you get, let's say, orange juice, and it has added vitamin, I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter, added vitamin D or something like that. Another way to do it is to not add it directly to the food, but you can, there are ways to feed your, let's say, cows certain foods that will increase the amount of these omega-3 fatty acids in the milk, right? And so that's another way to do it. And the textbook, classifies it in two different ways. To me, I see it as all one ways. You have a normal food and something has been added, whether you're doing it at the animal level or you're adding it later. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of just semantics, really. So there are a whole bunch of these out there. And like I said, they're, presumably very good to eat, right? And there's always a new superfood. I feel like every few months, suddenly people are talking about pomegranates like crazy, or cauliflower, or whatever. And these go in trends, and some of it has to do with marketing and things like that too, right? So what I want to do now is kind of just talk about some of these foods, these functional foods. These are ones that there's a whole bunch out there, but the ones kind of listed here have some science behind them. It may be not entirely conclusive, but it's kind of worth talking about them, because there's a lot of connections between. You can see this first category is talking about whole foods, wine, and tea. Okay, and these contain, certain of these foods contain a decent amount of flavonoids. And flavonoids, just like the carotenoids, are antioxidants, right? And like I said, antioxidants are chemicals that will mop up harmful chemicals that can lead to things like cancers or heart disease. So the logic is that if you eat lots of flavonoids, you're going to have lower rates of cancer and heart disease and things like that. And red wine is a good classic example where there are probably hundreds, if not many more studies looking at the health benefits of drinking red wine. And this is something I was hoping to look into a little bit more for this class, because I don't think the science is completely conclusive on that, in terms of what is going on, in terms of how much red wine to drink, and if there are enough flavonoids in red wine to even make an actual difference. But there are some epidemiological studies that show people who regularly drink red wine seem to have lower rates of cancer and heart disease. So the question is it the red wine, or is there some other confounding factor in their lifestyle that is doing this? Too much red wine is actually going to lead to more cancers, and never mind other health issues. So how much is too much, and is a little bit good for you? And there's certainly some debate around this, which is something I'd love to look into a bit more on the whole thing. So that's kind of a big one to kind of mention about this. These flavonoids, like I said, like carotenoids, are found in all sorts of vegetables and other things. A lot of whole foods. By whole foods, like I said, I mean unprocessed foods that are kind of relatively natural and that kind of thing. Certain teas, green tea is one that I've seen over the last few years has been getting a lot of headlines for saying it has lots of flavonoids in it. I don't know why green tea versus other teas. I drink a lot of tea. I drink a lot of green tea. I don't really know what the difference is between green and black tea or any of the other teas. I have no idea. I just like certain ones because they taste good, or they help you feel warm in the wintertime. Okay, so what about chocolate? Okay, I know that everyone wants chocolate to be the most amazing health food ever. And dark chocolate, in fact, over the last few years, there's been so much marketing towards how good dark chocolate is for you. And why is that? So dark chocolate, all chocolate has flavonoids in it as well. So there's that flavonoid thing as well. A little bit different than the flavonoids you found in chemicals that you find in the red wine. But do some of the same things, lower rates of cancers and heart disease, and may also reduce blood clotting. So that's a little bit different from the flavonoids that you would see in red wine, right? So great, dark chocolate is okay. Apparently, some good studies on what this whole thing is good for you. Here's the problem with chocolate: it's super fattening. Right? So if you take a look, here's a little graph I found on the internet kind of saying, okay, if you want to get enough of these flavonoids to what would be called a heart healthy dose, you would have to eat apparently 4 3/4 ounces. So I had to look that one up, and I forgot what the answer was, but if I remember correctly, I think that's like eating 4 chocolate bars, something like that, maybe 3 chocolate bars. I can't remember exactly how that was. It's quite a few chocolate bars, 750 calories. For a lot of people, that's a third to a half of the calories they should be consuming in a day. And so, yeah, I mean, some people are like, totally worth it. But I think the bottom line is you have to eat a lot of chocolate to make this really worth it. And unfortunately, there's the whole fattening aspect of chocolate and all the sugar in it. That is kind of, on the other end of things, eating too much sugar can lead to heart disease and cancers and things like that. Chocolate syrup, you can see you'd have to drink 26 ounces. Again, I'm not sure how much an ounce is. I have to look that up. But 3,000 calories of chocolate syrup, that's definitely fattening. Milk chocolate from a chocolate bar, 40 ounces. So almost 6,000 calories. Probably, yeah, so eating a little bit of chocolate, not such a bad idea. Probably most of us are better off getting our flavonoids from fruits and vegetables and having dark chocolate as a treat once in a while, or maybe small amounts every day, rather than eating 4 chocolate bars. And again, this is the kind of thing where, when you're looking at nutritional trends and suggestions, if something is too good to be true, it probably is. In many cases, that seems to be kind of, one of those life wisdom things to always go by. If something is too good to be true, definitely you want to be suspicious. Another thing to look at in terms of these chocolate studies, this is from the same article in saying that, they were looking at these health studies. There are lots of health studies on chocolate, and if you look at it kind of from that perspective, it looks like chocolate is a great food. But the reality is many of the chocolate studies are funded by chocolate companies. And they're not publishing, they're only publishing the good ones. So there is a funding and publishing bias here in that, if they have a study and shows that the chocolate is not good for you, then maybe they've decided not to release those results. So, this is something else to consider when you're looking at, claims around nutrition and whatnot is who is saying it and why are they saying it? Well, Mars is trying to sell chocolate. No surprise there. And of course, they're going to release findings of any good things they find about chocolate. So I have nothing against chocolate. I love chocolate. But like anything like that, moderation is one of the key. Somebody has a comment that she does not like dark chocolate. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an acquired taste. And, I've even met people who don't like any kind of chocolate. Now that's kind of weird, but, we'll try not to judge them. We'll just be happy that there's more for the rest of us. How about soybeans? So here's another interesting one that people have been talking about soybeans for quite a long time. Of course, soybeans form the basis of diet for many people, particularly if you're Asian. You might be quite familiar with soybeans because in some parts of Asia, this is making up a massive part of the diet. If you're familiar with tofu is usually made out of soybeans and whatnot. And so people have been pushing the health effects of soybeans for quite some time. They're a pretty good source of protein, right? So that's one reason why people consume a lot of them, because particularly if you're vegan or something like that, this is one good source of protein. But they also have these other chemicals in them, which are called phytoestrogens. Oops, let's go back to that. I was trying to accidentally touch my screen. And there seems to be some good indication that that consuming soybeans is good for your health. And again, this is epidemiological studies trying to look at, in particular, there's some studies looking at the diet of certain Asian populations versus Europeans, and they're seeing all of these things, right? Reduced risk of osteoporosis, reduced risk of certain cancers, particularly breast cancer is a big one. Reduced risk for heart disease, reduced symptoms from menopause, that kind of thing, right? And in fact, there's even one study I saw that was talking about a diet high in soy seems to be a pretty good indicator of bone health in postmenopausal women. So that's good news, right? But here's the thing, right? There doesn't seem to be any studies that show that phytoestrogens on their own actually benefit health. So people who've taken them in supplements and whatnot. So this is one of these things where there could be more than meets the eye in terms of eating the whole food, getting some benefits from it that aren't necessarily you can get from supplements. It might also have to do with a picture of the whole diet, right? If you think about people who are eating, let's say, somebody who's vegan and eating, all plant products versus somebody who's trying to, maybe they have a bad diet and they're taking these phytoestrogen supplements, and we're not looking at, you're looking at a whole different picture in terms of the complete diet, right? There are some good studies in rats that have shown that feeding the rats the phytoestrogens directly can reduce the cases of certain types of cancers and a few other good health effects. But the thing about rats is they're not humans, right? And their physiology is different, and there's a lot of things that can be done in rats that we don't see a perfect translation to humans. So there's still a lot of area. There's another area where really we'd like to see more out of the science, and I guess the recommendation is soybeans are good for you, particularly if you're replacing protein from animal sources is kind of the recommendation. And like I said, the other kind of recommendation is that for postmenopausal women, this actually may really be good for your bones. Okay, so a few other functional foods I want to talk about that have, like I said, have some decent science behind them. Like I said, that it's not perfect science. It's just kind of, there's some information there, and it seems that there's some good there's some good information there in terms of these might be good for you. Somebody has a comment here. She says, two of our pediatricians in Ontario told us to avoid soy milk with the kids because it can cause early puberty in girls. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That was something else I was going to mention. And again, something where I think the science is unclear on this. If you can see this term here, phytoestrogen, right? This is actually a chemical that is similar to human estrogen, right? And human estrogen, of course, is a female hormone, and it's has a whole bunch of functions in terms of like it regulates a woman's monthly cycle, has functions in breast development and puberty and lactation and pregnancy and all sorts of things like that, right? And so there seems to be some data that girls exposed to environmental estrogens may have early puberty. But what does that mean, right? It turns out there's actually quite a few environmental estrogens out there that may or may not be the cause of this. It's really hard to tell. There is a lot of data to show that girls are, in general, reaching puberty a little earlier than they were 50 years ago, for example. Does it have to do with soy in the diet? There's you may have heard of BPA, right? BPA. You can look that one up. That is also an estrogen mimic that's found in a lot of plastics. It's been banned from a lot of food plastics now. In Canada, Canada was actually a country that banned BPA early. But then what's it's been replaced by? In many cases, BPA has been replaced by something called BPS, which is also an estrogen mimic. So my understanding of this whole thing is that there are a lot of estrogen mimics and environmental estrogens out there. And probably there is not one cause of these kind of things. It's probably a combination of them all in terms of getting a little bit of BPA from plastic, a little bit of phytoestrogen from soy milk, and there's a bit of a cumulative effect. That's kind of my understanding of the whole thing. I could be wrong on that, but I think there's a lot that's not fully understood, and so it's sort of turned to that stage now where we're kind of recommending that these kind of things in terms of maybe reducing soy milk in kids and whatnot, and so maybe a good idea. Honestly, I would have to read more into it on that. I'm more familiar with plastic additives than the research on the phytoestrogens in soy. But thanks for bringing that up. It's definitely a worthwhile conversation. And if you guys are looking for some interesting reading, definitely you want to look up BPA. And it is found in a ridiculous number of products out there. And there's some good science to show that high doses, at least, are causing glandular issues in children and whatnot. I think part of the question too is what is a tolerable concentration as well, right? We all have BPA in our blood, by the way. So small amounts are probably not a problem, but what's that threshold is I think part of the question, which is why they ban BPA in most food plastics, particularly anything targeted towards children and babies, because they're the most vulnerable of the population. Okay, so let's talk about flaxseed. I don't know a lot about flaxseed. My association with flaxseed is that is actually kind of one of the historical facts you may or may not know about it. It was historically known to be kind of the thing that people would use to relieve constipation. And I feel like I have a memory of my mom talking about that at one point in my life. And I don't know whether she was trying to get me to eat some or whether she was having some. I have no idea. That's my association with flaxseed. It has something to do with constipation. Obviously, it's in a number of ingredients, things like bread and whatnot. I actually remember not too long ago buying some flaxseed bread. It was some sort of multigrain bread. It was delicious. So what's the big deal about it? It seems to be a new superfood, and this has something called a lignin in it, right? So right here, oops, lignin. So lignins are related to these phytoestrogens. So it turns out that bacteria in the gut will take these lignins and turn them into phytoestrogens, right? And this is one of these things that the research in humans, again, is kind of, there's some question mark around it, but there are actually some really good studies in rats. And literally they're showing in rats that are fed a flaxseed diet versus a conventional diet, they can actually see tumors shrink. So this is like pretty cool. Again, a rat is not a human. There are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences. So you know what is going on here? We don't really know. Probably there's a good healthy dose of these things to have, and again, having whole grains and getting some of them is good. Getting too much may be a problem as well. There's also some studies that show high concentrations of lignins can actually reduce vitamin absorption in the gut. So again, something where you probably don't want to take supplements on it, but having some flaxseed in your diet may do you some good. Again, like I said, there's the science on this is still evolving, and who knows when or if we'll get some good answers on these things. Let's talk about tomatoes. I don't know if any of you guys like tomatoes. I hate tomatoes, and I don't use that word lightly. I don't use the word hate lightly ever at all. This is one of the few things I hate in life, tomatoes. I think they ruin foods. I can't stand the taste. I don't eat ketchup. I don't eat tomato sauce. I despise them in almost all forms, other than they're a nice color. But I understand that many people love tomatoes. I have many people in my family that love to grow them, and they love to talk about the color. Of course, a nice, beautiful red vegetable in your salad. And garden tomatoes are apparently amazing for people who love tomatoes. So I won't hold that against you. There's also, here's another area where there's some good science behind this. You can see it says there on the slide that 5 tomato-containing meals per week apparently gives you a lesser chance of certain types of cancers. So that's incredible. 5 tomato-containing meals a week, that's a lot of tomatoes. I don't know whether those are studies done in Italy or whatnot, because I think they consume a lot of tomatoes there. But and that would also be my parents, I suppose. My parents were a little nuts about tomatoes, and I think they had a hard time understanding why anyone on this planet would ever not like a tomato. So anyway, there's my rant about tomatoes. I'll probably rant about tomatoes again sometime. Like I said, I won't hold it against you if you love tomatoes. That is totally fine with me, and they're probably good for you. So again, this has to do with another antioxidant, which is called lycopene. So these antioxidants are good things to have, and they're found, you're going to see the trend, they're found in so many fruits and vegetables, particularly a lot of fruits and vegetables with lots of colors. So this goes back to that phytochemical thing. Blueberries have lots of antioxidants in them, nice intense blue color, for example. Pomegranates, this is why a lot of these things end up on these superfood lists. And think about it, if you eat a bunch of tomatoes or a bunch of blueberries or a whole bunch of pomegranate seeds, think about all the benefits. You're getting fiber, you're not getting a lot of calories, and they're packed with vitamins and hopefully these antioxidants. So, not a bad thing to eat a bunch of tomatoes or sometimes these other superfoods for those reasons. Okay, there's a couple more I want to talk about, and I want to talk about probiotics a little bit today. We'll probably come back to probiotics again later on in the semester. Let's talk about garlic for a minute. This is another area where I wish I knew a little bit more about garlic, because I know over the years I've read a little bit about it here and there, and the amount of health claims around garlic are huge. You can see I have some of them listed there. Heart health. Garlic has antibacterial, antifungal properties. So it can maybe help us against infections. Apparently it helps to thin the blood, which reduces the amount of heart disease and things like that. And apparently it can improve blood cholesterol. Somebody is mentioning it wards off vampires, so that is definitely a perk. if you don't like vampires. Nice joke there. But apparently it has these organosulfur compounds in there, and it has been shown in laboratory animals at least to inhibit cancer development. So lots could be said about garlic. Like I said, lots of health claims around it, and there is a decent amount of kind of in the lab sort of research to show that this might be the case. I do remember years ago having I supervised a science fair project, and it definitely has antibacterial properties, as we learned in that science fair project. I don't think that is any new information, but it definitely can do that. And I've even seen somewhere I saw a hand sanitizer containing garlic oil, I think, or something like that. So I don't know what that was all about, because I'm just imagining my hands smelling like garlic, but I don't know if the oil doesn't have the odor to it. But that's one I was going to avoid. Okay, so here's another one. There's a bunch of these foods out here that do have some science behind them. These cholesterol reducing margarines mostly, but you can find some juices and other candies in them out there. And if you take a look at this, so what is this all about, right? You can see it has this claim right on the cover of the package. It says it has plant sterols in it which help reduce cholesterol. So these margarines have added plant sterol esters in them. Again, some chemistry terms for you, and if you want to have a discussion outside of class about what a sterol ester is, I can certainly go into a lot of details on that. A sterol ester, by the way, is kind of a compound that is similar to cholesterol, but it's a plant-based product, and it's actually pretty good for you. And in fact, there's been a bunch of studies looking at these things. You can see I have this note here, is that eating these things actually has shown to reduce cholesterol levels in the blood over a short amount of time. So what they've done in these studies, they've taken people who are eating usually butter or traditional margarine, and they say, here, why don't you try this for, and I don't know what a short amount of time is, but I think it was over a couple of months. And they can start to actually see reduction in blood cholesterol levels. So this is something, there's some science to back this up, but it's not all as exciting as it might be. By the way, if you just replace butter with conventional margarine, you can actually see blood cholesterol levels go down over 6 months. So just something else to think about. And there are drugs that reduce this exact type of thing. A lot of elderly people who have high blood pressure and high blood cholesterol levels will end up on these drugs. I can't think of what they're called, the name of them at the moment. And they'll reduce blood cholesterol levels by 40% a month very easily. So, you know, there are other ways to do this. And just to say, but these sterol esters do act a little bit like drugs. And so there's some things that must be known, right? Is that there's probably a sweet amount, right? A good amount to have. And whether the amount you're getting in those margins is good or not, because it turns out there's studies that show that high levels of these things can actually contribute to heart disease. So it's like, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So this is part of the question in terms of how much is a good safe level, I think is still being teased out. But high levels, and I don't know what high levels means, can actually increase heart disease. So probably small amounts are a good amount to get. And should we be adding it to foods is the real question, right? There's been basically 0 studies done on children and teenagers. So maybe we shouldn't be feeding this stuff to kids and teenagers. The problem with foods, drugs are hugely highly regulated. You can't like give a drug to, you know, anybody unless it's been approved, right? This is why you've probably seen with the vaccine rollout where adults were approved first, and then, you know, it took some time before they were approved for kids and those kind of things and whatnot. There's very, very strict processes when it comes to drugs. With foods, on the other hand, it's not quite as strict. Obviously, we have to have safe foods, but if you're just manipulating existing foods, in this case here, you're taking you know, an ingredient out of a plant and you're adding it to your margarine. It's like you're just mixing and matching 2 foods, and it's not seen as something that is you know, it's not regulated the same way that drugs are. even though there might be harmful effects, like I said, in terms of, we don't know what effects these might have on kids and teenagers. And there's also indications that these sterols may dissolve other beneficial phytochemicals, since they're fats, and so fats like to kind of dissolve with fats, and so what that means is it might reduce some of these antioxidants that we were talking about already, like the carotenes you find in tomatoes and carrots and things. So, this is one of these things where there's a little bit of debate about, how much they should be allowing in there, and maybe someday this will be regulated, because there's probably a good amount to have, but that you don't want to exceed. Okay, so the last one I want to talk about a little bit is yogurts and probiotics. This is one area. My background being microbiology, I could certainly go on about this one for a long time, but I'll just give you some of the basics here. Yogurts are made by usually fermenting some sort of product. Usually it's milk, and you ferment it with some sort of bacterial colony. So the bacteria in a yogurt can or cannot sometimes be probiotics. So what does that mean? Probiotic is technically where you are applying or eating or digesting basically an active culture of microorganisms, hoping to get a beneficial health kind of effect, right? And so these things have exploded. The amount of marketing around probiotics, it's unbelievable. I'll show you some of the products I found on the shelves in the grocery store. The typical ones are yogurts. And not all yogurts have probiotics, but many of them do nowadays, and you see that advertised on them. Activia was one of the big companies that was popularizing them long before many of the other companies. Danone as well. You can see this one here is making a claim about the immune system, and usually the benefits have something to do with digestive health. Doesn't that make sense? You're putting food into your digestive tract, and the whole idea is to basically put good bacteria in there, and the good bacteria will maybe displace the bad microorganisms in your gut, kind of thing. And we'll talk a little bit about microorganisms in the gut in the next unit. But usually we're looking at benefits around intestinal things, like maybe alleviating the effects of diarrhea or something like that. And I have a little slide talking about that here in a moment. These are some of the bacteria that might be advertised on these things. Kind of the big one that you see is Lactobacillus here in the middle. Lactobacillus is really common in most yogurts, so in a lot of cases they're not even adding it extra, it's just the one that's already in there. Bifidobacterium is the big one that Activia kind of pushes and says, hey, this is our amazing strain that we've developed, and it's going to be better than all the other yogurts. I have this little slide here that kind of talks about some of the three main ones and kind of the main claims around what these organisms are going to do. And you can see that a lot of it has to do with the big one is digestive health, but other things like helping to digest fiber and support blood sugar. And again, that has to do with digestive kind of functions, and probably worth talking about a little bit more in a later unit. But mostly it's around digestion, right? And because of course you are applying those bacteria to your digestive tract. Just want to show you some of the products that I've seen out there. Some of them have been gaining a lot of popularity recently, like these kefir beverages. A kefir, my understanding, is basically just a drinkable yogurt of some sort. I don't know if my definition on that is quite spot on, but there are many, many, many different products out there. You can see I saw this one here, this some sort of ginger beet kind of product. And I honestly say I don't think I would ever try that one. I'm not a big fan of beets, but I can see the attraction, nice purple color on there, and apparently has some probiotics in there. Some of them come in the form of tablets or gummies. I've seen chocolate bars. I've seen even probiotic coffee. I have no idea how that works, because of course you're probably killing the organisms when you're making the coffee. And then these baby puffies. I actually tried these baby puffies, and they're absolutely delicious. And apparently they have probiotics in them. So these things, like I said, are all over the place. I went through the grocery store, and that part of the grocery store aisle, it's just incredible how many new products there are there. Here's some that I saw, these little probiotic drinks. I guess the photograph doesn't tell you too much about the product. Maybe that's on the back side. Some of these were right in the yogurt section in, was it Save-On, or maybe this was Safeway just before it closed. And you can see some of these products are expensive. But you know what? They are helping some people. And I'll talk about that here in a second. Just wanted to show you kind of one more slide here. You know, when it comes to the claims of probiotics, here's another area where the research is just at its infancy. So notice here I have kind of some different categories of probiotic claims. I made this table from my own research. And you can see these ones here with the big yeses. This is definitely where we're seeing there's some good science to show that these things are helping people. Not everyone though. That's the thing with probiotics, is that you can, and it's just like anything to do with humans. Some people are helped a lot, some people a little bit, some people it doesn't seem to be helping at all. And that's kind of the thing, right? Everyone has a different gut, a different population of microorganisms in their gut, different genetics, different diet. All those things can make a difference. But usually having something to do with digestive issues, particularly reducing the symptoms of diarrhea, say traveler's diarrhea, you know, this kind of things helps. The smaller yeses, you can see improving bowel movements and those kind of things. And some people with other digestive discomforts. Some people swear by them. I met enough people that have claimed that once they start taking certain probiotics that have helped. Like I said, you can get tablets, and there's different types of, I don't want to call them prescriptions because I think a lot of these things you can buy off the shelf. And there's a lot of products out there that are helping people. May or may not help everybody. That's the problem. You can see a small yes here for helping women with yeast infections. There's been a few studies done on that, and this kind of thing is helping some people and maybe not other people. And then notice this whole section here down at the end, all sorts of claims around the immune system, maybe. You know what? I would seriously question a lot of these claims. The immune system might be a maybe because there are a lot of immune cells in the gut. And the immune system is connected with the digestive system. But at this point, it still is a maybe. I've seen claims around reducing the amount of colds and allergies, treating obesity. I mean, it just gets out of control. But maybe someday we'll have some better information on these, or we'll know which strains of bacteria can actually help with certain things. And maybe it'll have something to do with, okay, you gotta eat this probiotic, but it has to go along with this particular diet, let's say. And you know, we'll see. These things are very interesting, and I love following the research around probiotics. So a couple more things before we finish up today. Is every food functional? Good question, right? A lot of whole foods are. All those fruits and vegetables and those kind of things. You know, I think kind of the thing to go for is, you know, those fruits and vegetables. You're going to get a lot of benefits no matter how many of them you eat. And with foods high in fat and high in sugar, high in sodium, eat with moderation. That's kind of just the general rule around nutrition. So like I said, nutrition, it sounds complicated, but when it comes down to it, it's often what Mom said. Eat your fruits and vegetables. Don't eat that so much junk food. Last kind of thing, which I've sort of hinted on a little bit here and there, is that, you know, you can buy a lot of supplements now that are concentrating phytochemicals or concentrating, you know, like cranberries and green tea. And the thing you have to watch out for if you are taking these kind of things is that too much of a good thing can be bad for you. You can see that example there around the cranberry tablets, in that, you know, some people are taking them because they're trying to prevent urinary tract infections, which again, the science on that is not perfectly clear on whether it actually helps. But if you consume too many of these, it can increase your amount of kidney stones. There was a case a couple of years ago where some guy was eating those green tea tablets, and he was popping like 10 of them a day, and he actually did permanent damage to his kidneys. So people have to be careful when taking supplements. A lot of people take too many of them. And you don't need to take a lot of supplements if your diet is balanced and you're getting the nutrients you need from eating healthy foods. So that's kind of the last thing to say about these. Lastly, kind of just the theme around things we've been talking about. Always ask good questions, right? You know, people are making claims around food. You know, ask those questions. What is it? Does it work? Is there actual science behind it? Are there warnings from Health Canada? Those kind of things. Lots of good questions to ask, and I'm not going to go through these, but just some of the kind of the same questions we've been asking about things, and we'll talk about these things all semester. Some tips here from the textbook. All the same tips we've seen before. Eat fruits and vegetables. Look for replacing high fats with better fats, all those kind of things. You can take a read at this anytime you like. Take a moderate approach. That's kind of the bottom line. So I realize we're out of time, and that's exactly where I wanted to finish today. So this is the end of topic 2. And so don't forget to do quiz 1 if you haven't done it. Quiz 2 is available right now. And like quiz 1, you'll have 1 week to complete it. I know topic 2 is a little bit longer than topic 1, but I'm still restricting it to 10 questions. That's the goal every week, is to have 10 questions. So sorry I went a couple of minutes over time today, but that's all I have to say for today. And I guess I will see everybody on, what's today? Today's Wednesday. So I'll see you on Friday.